Thank you, Wolfgang, for that kind introduction, and thank you also for making Munich to such an important and vibrant forum for debate. And this is even more important at the time of such turmoil and uncertainty, stemming both from the East and from the South. And this week, as you all know, NATO defense ministers took important decisions to address the challenges stemming from the South. We agreed to deploy a standing maritime group to the Aegean Sea to assist in tackling the refugee and migrant crisis in Europe. We also decided to intensify intelligence, surveillance and reconnaissance at the Turkish-Syrian border. We agreed to step up our support for the international coalition to counter ISIL. And I am happy to take questions about these issues afterwards. But now I'm going to focus and to concentrate on the challenges stemming from the East. Russia is our largest neighbor, and it is an international power. We have seen a more assertive Russia, a Russia which is destabilizing the European security order. NATO does not seek confrontation, and we don't want a new Cold War. At the same time, our response has to be firm. So how do we square the circle? I strongly believe that the answer lies with both more defense and more dialogue. Pursued together, they can help us to achieve greater stability in Europe. And let me start with defense. Russia's actions in Ukraine have triggered a robust response from the international community, involving sanctions, suspension from G8, and increased support to our partners in the East. And NATO is undertaking the biggest reinforcement of our collective defense in decades, to send a powerful signal to deter any aggression or intimidation. Not to wage war, but to prevent war. And that is why deterrence is a key part of our overall strategy. Modern deterrence must deter today's threats, not yesterday's, whether they come from the East or from the South, from state or non-state actors, hybrid, conventional or nuclear. Deterrence starts with resolve. It's not enough to feel it, you also have to show it. This week, NATO's defense ministers took important decisions in that respect. We agreed to enhance our forward presence in the eastern part of the alliance. This presence will be multinational, to make clear that an attack against one ally will not just be met by national forces, but by forces from across the alliance. It will be rotational and supported by a program of exercises, with the right infrastructure and pre-positioning of equipment to facilitate rapid reinforcement. In a very clear sign of allied solidarity, the United States has set out plans to significantly increase their military presence in Europe, with more troops, more exercises, and more pre-positioned equipment. At our summit in Warsaw in July, I expect we will decide to further strengthen the alliance defense and deterrence. Our deterrence also has a nuclear component. Russia's rhetoric, posture and exercises of its nuclear forces are aimed at intimidating its neighbors, undermining trust and stability in Europe. For NATO, the circumstances in which any use of nuclear weapons might have to be contemplated are extremely remote. But no one should think that nuclear weapons can be used as part of a conventional conflict. It will change the nature of any conflict fundamentally. NATO has continued to reduce the number of nuclear weapons. We keep them safe, secure and effective for deterrence and to preserve the peace, not for coercion or intimidation. Our policy on ballistic missile defense has also been clear all along. It's purely defensive, designed to defend our territory, our people and our forces against threats from outside the Euro-Atlantic area. NATO's missile defense is neither designed nor directed against Russia. It does not and cannot undermine Russian strategic deterrence. Moreover, we have offered Russia cooperation on missile defense. We remain transparent as we continue to develop our program. In response to Russia's actions, we are significantly strengthening our defense and deterrence. Some are concerned that we are sleepwalking towards escalation with Russia. I understand those concerns, but I do not share them. We strive for a more constructive and more cooperative relationship with Russia. We see defense and dialogue as complementary. Dialogue has many dimensions. Russia is a permanent member of the United Nations Security Council, and Russia played a constructive role in the Iran nuclear deal. Allies engage with Russia bilaterally and in multilateral organizations such as the OSCE. The NATO-Russia Council is another important forum for dialogue with Russia. We need dialogue for a number of different reasons. It is important to promote strategic stability, to clearly communicate our intentions, our posture and our expectations to Russia. Dialogue is important to increase transparency and predictability and to reduce the risks of incidents and accidents. And if they do happen, it is important to avoid escalation between our forces. The downing of the Russian fighter plane over Turkey underlines how urgent this is. I believe we should update our mutual inspection regime and the reporting of our military exercises, including those held at short notice. We publish a schedule of allied exercises on our website. I invite Russia to do the same. And finally, dialogue is important for those issues where our differences run deep, like Ukraine, especially when times are as difficult as they are now. We have clear principles. Borders must not be violated. Sovereign nations have the right to chart their own course. These principles are fundamental for European security. It is essential that we engage with Russia. The NATO-Russia Council is a good place to have a more substantive engagement. Yesterday, I met with Minister Lavrov, and we agreed to explore the possibilities for convening a meeting of the NATO-Russia Council. Ladies and gentlemen, there can be no choice between defense and dialogue. To ensure long-term stability in Europe, we need both. And given the complex security environment we face today, I believe we need more defense and more dialogue. Political engagement, does not mean a return to business as usual. We are in a new reality with Russia. But we do need a constructive dialogue. And that begins when we stop talking past each other and start talking with each other. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Jens. We have time for maybe 2 or 3 questions. Who would like to go first? Questions? Don't be timid. Francois, you had your moment yesterday already. The gentleman here in the middle.
Sehr geehrte Damen und Herren,
Können Sie sich bitte vorstellen, damit wir wissen, wer das ist?
Alexander Neu, Verteidigungsausschuss Die Linke im Deutschen Bundestag. Sehr geehrter Herr Stoltenberg, Sie haben gerade das Raketenabwehrsystem der NATO angesprochen. Es sei weder konzipiert gegen Russland, noch sei es eingesetzt gegen Russland. Wir wissen alle, dass der Iran-Deal vor einigen Monaten oder vor einem Jahr zustande gekommen ist, gegen den der Raketenabwehrsystem ja ursprünglich gerichtet war. Warum wird auf die Fortsetzung des Raketenabwehrsystems nicht verzichtet, nachdem Iran gewissermaßen als Gegner ausgefallen ist, was seine Potenziale anbetrifft, und sich das System ja offensichtlich nicht gegen Russland richtet? Insofern verstehe ich die Fortsetzung des Projekts nicht.
Is it okay if I take 2, 3? Yes, please.
Konstantin Kosachev, the Russian Parliament. Mr. Secretary General, exactly 25 years ago, we signed together the Paris Chapter for New Europe. In that document, if you reread it, NATO is not mentioned a single time, neither EU, as a component of a future common security arrangement in Europe. As we all understand, the development started to lead somewhere else. Do you believe that NATO, by its enlargement, by its one-sided actions in certain third countries, by spreading its responsibility, so-called responsibility outside of NATO borders, has no responsibility for what has happened in our common Europe and in relations between NATO and Russia? Thank you.
And maybe one third one. And I saw somebody in, yes, behind. Please. Is that?
Thank you, Wolfgang. Robert Hutter, former ambassador to NATO. I was pleased to hear the Secretary General mention his discussions yesterday with Minister Lavrov about the NATO-Russia Council as part of deterrence, defense, and dialogue. The NATO-Russia Founding Act and the Rome Agreement had 19 areas of possible cooperation. I was wondering what NATO, to the extent you can talk about it, would like to try to engage the Russians in as a way of testing whether Mr. Putin is prepared again to play a constructive rather than destructive role in broader European security.
Jens, you have exactly 4 minutes to answer these questions.
First on ballistic missile defense. As I said, it's not designed, it's not directed against Russia. I very much welcome, and actually we have offered transparency to Russia on the development of the program. Second, I very much welcome the Iran nuclear deal, where Russia played a constructive role. But that is about nuclear warheads, nuclear weapons. Iran and other countries are continuing to develop their ballistic missile programs. So that is a threat which still exists. And our program is aimed at threats from outside the Euro-Atlantic area. And we will continue with the program because the threat is still there. Second, on NATO's role. Also, first on enlargement. Well, enlargement is something which is based on a very fundamental principle in the Helsinki Final Act, that every nation has the right to decide its own path. So we respect when countries want to join NATO, and we also respect them if they don't want to join NATO. And whether they join or not is a question which has to be decided by 28 allies. and the applicant nation. No one else has the right to intervene because every nation has the right to decide its own path. Then we have, of course, addressed issues, challenges outside NATO territory, like in the Balkans. I think that NATO played and plays an important role to stabilize Balkan. We have worked with partners from all over the world to fight terrorism, to prevent Afghanistan becoming a safe haven for international terrorism. And we have worked together with partners also on many other different international conflicts, because if our neighbors are more stable, we are more secure, and NATO will continue to do so. Then on the NATO-Russia Founding Act and the NATO-Russia Council, well, I think it's useful to use that tool to develop dialogue with Russia. But I have to underline that what we decided after the annexation of Crimea was to suspend practical cooperation, but to keep channels for political dialogue open, meaning also the NATO-Russia Council. We are not re-establishing practical dialogue, but we would like to see more political. We don't re-establish practical cooperation, but we would like to see more political dialogue on different levels, including in the NATO-Russia Council. That was as brief as I could.
That was fantastic. We have time for one last question, if there is one. Francois, yes, now. But be brief.
Very brief question. Russia has an ABM system around Moscow. NATO intends to go forward with its ABM system. Is there any scope for any form of negotiation vis-à-vis these two systems?
What we are doing is that we are developing our ballistic missile defense program or system, and we are doing that, and we are offering transparency. Then there are bilateral negotiations and contacts on many different fields between the United States and Russia. I welcome that, but I think I should leave it to the United States to answer on their bilateral contacts and possible agreements with Russia.
Mr. Secretary General, thank you very much. That was a great opening session. Thank you so much. Let's give a hand to Jens Stoltenberg.